When it comes to understanding the physical compared to the mental with endurance, how do we navigate that when we're appreciating the mind and body as a unified entity versus two separate things?
Yeah, it's definitely, the I mean, the underlying question that I think motivated, or got me interested in the research that I wrote about in Endure is like, you know, when I finish a race and I'm like, I went as hard as I could, how much of that limit is dictated by mind and how much is my body? And um, you could say, first of all, you're never going to get a perfect answer to that question. Second of all, like as you're sort of suggesting, the question is not well posed because my mind is part of my body. You can't like, where do you draw the line between mind and body? Is if you're experiencing central fatigue, if nerve signals back to your brain are convincing your brain to down regulate your muscles, is that your mind or is that your body? So look, it's impossible to answer that question except that, or which doesn't mean that I don't try. And there was a study, I don't know, must have been 5 or 6 years ago now, which I can't remember the exact details, but I think it was like a cycling study. They put people through a bunch of physical tests and a bunch of psychological tests, and then had them do an endurance task. And it's like, okay, which of these parameters predict performance best? And so with that particular construct, they were able to come. It's like, it's 69% physical and 31% mental. And of course, that's the numbers aren't really that precise. And so it depends how you frame the question. But if I had to, like, if there's a message that I think is important to take away, it's that um, they both matter, and that we often, certainly, again, running is my metaphor for everything. If you're running a race, if you put me on a treadmill and dial up the speed to some quick pace or whatever, and then say, Alex, run until you fall off the back. When I fall off the back, I'll be like, man, I was trying, and you offer me like, $1,000 for every minute I stay on. So I'm really, really trying hard. And eventually I fall off the back and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have stayed on for another minute to get another $1,000, but I just couldn't. My legs couldn't do it. I was breathing too hard. I was just at my limits. That is almost always an illusion. If it was $1,000,000 instead of $1,000, my legs probably would have been able to do it.
I like that idea, and you write about it in your book a little. You say, after all, the brain is part of the body. And it's kind of a rhetorical question, another tough question to ask. But why don't we see it that way?
Yeah, oh boy. Well, that is like, the philosophy of the last 5,000 years, trying to
Yeah.
understand, the duality of mind and body. Um, so a couple things. One is that physical sensations feel very real and measurable. And so certainly in the context of endurance, it's like, if I'm trying to lift up a weight and I can't lift up a weight, it's not like I don't want to lift. It doesn't feel like I'm deciding not to lift up the weight. So there's a lot of uh, there's a lot going on in our minds that we don't have access to, or in our brains, let's say. So we have the illusion that we're, these rational creatures that are, every time I move, I'm like, I am going to decide to move my hand over towards this cup so that I can drink some water. But in reality, it's like the iceberg where most of the action is going on underneath the surface. So I think we're unaware in a lot of cases of what our minds are doing. And so that helps to give us the illusion that, oh, there's this separate thing called my body that I just control by thinking about it. Whereas in reality, you can do, the whole, in psychology, not just in sports science, but in psychology, there's various studies you can do that people do that show uh, all the calculations that are going on under the surface in your mind that dictate how your body reacts to a given stimulus. So I don't know, that's not a good answer because it's a very hard thing to answer.
Yeah. I mean, it was a
But
tough question. So.
yeah, no, but it's an interesting thing to think about, and and so we can talk about this and we can say, look, Tim, we all know that the mind is part of the body. But no matter how often I say that, it doesn't change my subjective experience that there's a little man inside my head that's
Yeah.
making decisions and that's separate from this machinery of my muscles. It still feels that way no matter how much I tell myself that it's not.